Check. Good morning. I'm Gary Gibson. Nice to meet you all. This is a middle school. Oh, congratulations. They don't sound like a middle school, so you're doing very well. You have a very good presentation from out there. The energy is good, and the first thing I noticed before you even played, before you even warmed up, the first thing I noticed that I was impressed with was high fives. That did not get lost in the mix, right? Just the fact that you're all relating to each other and that you're excited to be here and excited to perform, that came across even before you even touched your instruments. So that endeared me some, just from the very beginning. You're very well rehearsed. Do we have a percussionist as a director? So that was obvious to me as well, just the fact that we had a very, very strong engine room presence back there, and on the samba, I really appreciated all that went into that. It was very well rehearsed. There's just a couple of balance issues from out there that I was noticing, and that is, there's a lot of stuff in the cellos that kind of gets lost out there. You have some answering lines in the first tune, like at the beginning and stuff, that weren't coming out clear, and then later on, there are strumming patterns that don't get in the samba that kind of get lost, and I think that a lot of that has to do with if there's, what do we have, three triples? Oh, you have two double guitars? Okay, I didn't see those. So if the people who are strumming aren't playing exactly the same rhythm, right in the pocket, I'm gonna go ahead and use adult terms, like in the pocket. If they are just slightly off, then what the listener hears is we have 4 sets here. 4 people, each playing individually. We don't get to hear the power of 4 instruments being played at exactly the same time. And strumming patterns are so this is primarily for double seconds and triples and guitar players, is that when you're strumming, those things have to be exactly together in order for them to be coming across as good strong rhythms, and they have to be synchronized very well. And we have this one gentleman over here and the rest of them over there. Do they sometimes play the same part, or is he primarily playing with bass? Yes, and that's a great idea, to have some presence near the front of that voice. I like to have, it makes a huge difference if you have 1 or 2 sets of doubles in the front line, 1 set of triples in the front line. If you can pull that off, I'm still teaching bands that we need to have clusters of players so that they can all relate to each other. But the next sort of incarnation, the next evolution, is to be able to have, a couple of tenor pans standing next to a set of double tenors and a set of double seconds and a set of triples here, and 1 set of bass on the other side, in fact. And then that way everybody's playing in their own band, so that all of that is heard just by each individual player. But let's see, your dynamics were great. I thought that you were really rendered the dynamics very well. It added a lot to the excitement. I thought the second piece was especially, it didn't seem to be tremendously difficult to play, but the thing that impresses is just the sensitivity with which you played it. You were very, very aware of the colors that needed to come out, and that it's a mood piece, right? It's all about mood. It's not about grooving and all that kind of stuff. It's just about setting a kind of painting a picture, and I think you all did that very well. So, yeah, my criticism, I enjoyed it very much, and my main criticisms have to do with kind of just the little rhythmic things, like when a tune is supposed to groove, sometimes that strumming isn't adding to it the way it could be, right? But especially for a middle school, fabulous. So I'll turn this over to CJ, and he can say more.
All right, good morning. You guys look fantastic. You sounded wonderful. I heard a lot of the same things that Gary was just talking about, but I'll add a couple of things that might be a little bit different. And it kind of has to do with, on each of your instruments, making sure you get the sound that you want. You obviously have very good instruction, and your balance in general is excellent in the band, so keep listening to your teacher. But because you're playing well and comfortable, also start thinking about if you're really getting the sound that you want in every note you're playing. So, for instance, in the first piece, the triples have some harder lines. The counter lines that Gary was saying got lost a little bit. Notice when your hands are moving, if you are intending to get all the notes to speak evenly, if your hand is getting over the center of the note, which really just takes like 30 seconds in a practice to notice how your hands are moving. And the same thing for the front line, for the lead players. You did a great job with all the syncopated rhythms. There's some spots where maybe in the first piece you have 3 16th notes together, that we lose some of the middle notes that can easily be fixed by all of you just, bless you, by all of you just getting your hand adjusted to where those playing positions are. And one thing that I talk about, this is like a little technique thing, is when you play the higher range notes, especially on the tenor pans along the front, sometimes it's harder to get the sound because you've got that small sweet spot, and every drum's slightly different, right? So one thing that I do with the groups that I work with back in Texas is, if you're having a hard time getting that to speak, if you think about thumb up in a smaller motion like this, a flicking motion, like anywhere from here to here is the comfortable hand position, right? And I wasn't on stage seeing how your hands were. Your approach was excellent, but if you're having a hard time getting higher notes to speak, notice if you can do something slightly different with your hand position to get it to come out the way that you want. And then along the lines of the pan balance, the middle piece was really nice contrast. I think there was just one bass that's supposed to play at the beginning, and the rhythm is like 1 N and 3, 1 N and 3. Don't lose the middle notes on that, so we hear that consistent rhythm all the way through. That's a very characteristic part of the song, and that carries so much of the feel of the piece all the way through. Percussion was excellent. I loved all the samba stuff on the first piece. It's not often I get to hear the frogs in anything, so I was like, finally, I think as percussionists we all have a frog on a shelf somewhere at home, and yeah, now you have it in the piece, which is wonderful. And I really appreciated that a lot of you are trying to communicate the pulse of the music. That's a big part of steel band aesthetic. I talk frequently about this with groups. A little bit goes a long ways in terms of stage presence. You all look very confident, but that extra little bit of movement engages the audience. And naturally, like if you're watching a group, oftentimes the people that are moving are the people that you end up watching because they're doing something in addition to contributing the sound. So I like that a lot of you along the front are trying to feel where the time is, and that's coming across as a collective group. And then on the last piece, this is similar to what Gary said about the inside voices. Sometimes they get lost a little bit, which may be in this space, but the double seconds in general have a very driving rhythm in that last African groove, and it would be nice to hear that a little bit more consistently and with a little stronger dynamic all the way through, because that helps the feel of the piece. Did we have 2 percussion solos on that last piece? Nice job on the lead solo on that one. Did we have a hand drum solo maybe, or a timbale solo? Was there? Okay, yeah. Yeah, so you could just play out a little bit. Don't be shy with those spots. You're way back in the back of the band, and that's your moment, right? So it's nice to be able to have that sound project. So congrats. Thank you very much.